welcome to Stormwater Awareness Week.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to contribute kind of what we do into the industry of protecting our waterways and streams as you know, projects are developed and soils are disturbed to construct things and build our infrastructure. So my name is Barry Nerhus from Endemic Environmental Services. Originally, this company started as a biological company. We continue to do wildlife and habitat restoration. And we started out that way and then slowly kind of started to increase our services into the stormwater industry. So we come from reading the permits originally, you know, to make sure that the wildlife and you know, the water resources are protected from a biological point of view, and then started seeing the other side of it with the general construction permit and you know, with the water board. So yeah, we've been doing this for the last 11 years, and this talk that I'm going to be presenting is going to be initially, we're going to talk about wetlands in general and the wildlife that use them. And I wanted to make sure that we kind of built a framework of, from a biological point of view, why we want to protect our waterways from erosion. So it's not, you know, I think a lot of times when we just look at regulation, there's just a lot of language, and it's like I wanted to show a couple faces of wildlife in this presentation to really show, like, these are the reasons why we're protecting our water resources. So, and also the content, Andrew, Fan, and Cheyenne, you know, big thanks to them for adding some of the content here. So we're going to move along right now. And how do we move the slide here?
Click on your, put your mouse on your PowerPoint presentation, just click on that.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
All right, thanks. I need all the help I can get, so thanks, John. So like I said, so we're going to have 3 parts to this presentation. We're going to talk initially just about wetlands, kind of just go over them very quickly, and then talk about the work that we've been mainly doing this spring and summer, kind of outside of the actual main rain season, but we did a lot of in-water work and diversions where there was fish passage and endangered species present. And then also the water quality sampling for the in-water work. So we've been working on you know, small creeks and also larger rivers. So wetlands, you know, we have different types of wetlands. Of course, we have lotic systems. Lotic systems, what they are they're basically rivers, creeks, streams. They're things that flow. And when you have a flowing system like this, you typically have a lot of oxygen. They start from, in California at least, from headwaters in the mountains, and where they have a lot of oxygen, cold water, not a lot of life, very low nutrient. And as they flow down into, say, the Sacramento Valley or the coastal areas, they slow down and take on a little bit more of a load. So in terms of nutrients, and actually the aquatic biology increases in density and diversity. So, and then obviously a lot of our rivers in California, they go to exit into the ocean. The reason why that's important is as you have these different rivers flowing, your parameters may be a lot different. So just understanding the water tends to be cleaner up in the headwaters, and then becomes more and more turbid and slower, and has a lot more suspended particulates in the actual river or creek, something like that. So even a canal, a ditch, those are still considered lotic because the water flows. So I know a lot of people that work in this industry would be dealing with those as well. So an lentic system, they're typically something that doesn't have any flowing water. So still water, you know, you have lakes like Lake Tahoe, reservoirs, ponds, marshes, things that don't flow. So the issue with those when it comes to water quality is if they are receiving a bunch of nutrients and stuff, they can become eutrophic and change the water quality from like a low nutrient or oligotrophic system into a eutrophic system, which is a heavy loaded area, which actually can become very toxic. Actually, I believe there's a lake up in Northern California called Clear Lake that it gets so much nutrient load it becomes really the not so clear lake because of all of the nutrients. So these systems act differently. If you have a marsh and you're trying to be working through that, and turbidity, and you're disturbing the soil there, the turbidity there is not going to really, it's not going to flow away like, say, in a moving creek or river. So, like I said in the beginning, we wanted to make sure that we were, I wanted to highlight some of the wildlife that occurs there, especially some of these that are sensitive, you know. So this right here is the steelhead trout. It's a species of special concern. Some runs of them are actually endangered. So these white lips are the main, that's how you can really tell it's a steelhead trout. So they are a salmon. Actually, they're in the Salmonidae family, but those white lips really give it away. And they're in these rivers and streams, and they do spawning. So the steelhead trout, for those of you who don't know, are anadromous fish, just like a Chinook salmon or a king salmon. They actually live their lives they're born in the headwaters and rivers and creeks, and then they flow out to the ocean, swim out to the ocean as they get larger and they have the opportunity. They get very large and come up the rivers again and breed and can live their lives. So it's basically a rainbow trout that is adapted to go back and forth into salt water. So they can actually go back and forth several times. They're not necessarily like a Chinook salmon when they breed. That's the end of their life cycle. These guys it's important to have high water quality and for spawning, and also temperatures. So temperature, pH, these different parameters could affect the eggs when they're breeding. The Chinook salmon is obviously one that up north is a lot of their populations have been declining. There's several different runs of them throughout the year. You have the spring, summer, fall, winter runs, and due to different issues, their populations have been declining. But you notice that these ones don't have those white lips; they have the black lips. So these are obviously still flowing through the Sacramento, the Delta, and several of the rivers that are flowing in the valley. Our largest native frog, the California red-legged frog, another species that is listed as threatened on the federal and endangered species list. And what's important for water quality for these guys is amphibians are highly sensitive to toxins in the water because they actually absorb all their nutrients and water through their skin. So amphibians actually don't drink any water. They just absorb everything through their skin. So if there's any toxins, or if pH changes to acidic or too basic, you can have a lot of issues, and the populations of these species will diminish. And then the foothill yellow-legged frog, which is kind of the headwaters of the Yuba River and the Feather River in the Sierras, has just been listed as on the state endangered species list, and they need very clear water. So affecting the water with turbidity or changing the water chemistry could really affect these populations. So, coupled with a lot of the permits that people get with for different projects or agencies, a lot of these animals are tied into that, and for these reasons. So, because they're listed and sensitive, and so there's a lot of language in there. Then going to the reptiles, the western pond turtle, they're another species of special concern, another sensitive species by the state. They're actually certain populations of them are being reviewed as a candidate as an endangered species. So these guys have also been in decline. And then of course you have the mammals. You have river otters and beavers that are kind of more on the top of the food chain, that are really important for the health of our rivers and also indicators that the river has a nice food web there. So I just wanted to make sure that we talked about, you know, this is one of the big reasons why some of these permits are, you know, you have the 1600 permit from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, or if there's an endangered species, you have the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, and then of course, if there are any fish like the steelhead trout and salmon, you're going to have NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service involved with your permits. So understanding that they're important, and you know, these agencies exist to protect all of these species, and their goal is to help them recover. You know, us in our industry protecting water from erosion and change of pH and dissolved oxygen and other chemistry that affects these waterways only helps with that mission. Hence, that's why these permits are there. You know, also water is important for humans. Clearly, we use it. We use it for recreation. We use it for fishing. This was a great picture of somebody removing a striped bass, enjoying it. I love removing invasive species. Striped bass is not native to California, so they're actually impact our native ecosystem. So if you guys are fishermen and women, please take all the striped bass you can and don't restock it. That would be really beneficial for our systems. Obviously, we drink it. Apparently, we're supposed to drink like over a gallon a day. I have trouble getting, you know, a quarter gallon or a half a gallon. So it's unbelievable how much we're supposed to drink, and yet, you know, I drink 1 or 2 glasses. I look at them a lot. Then, of course, agriculture. So this is a photo of you know, a rice field being filled. Because rice needs a lot of water during the summertime so that it can grow, a lot of during sunlight, and we produce in California a lot of rice for the world. So it takes a lot of water. So 90% of our wetlands, usually the number is about 91% of wetlands in California have been lost, or altered, so that had to do with draining and making aqueducts and channelization and just draining for development. So we've lost a lot of that habitat. And so since we have, that's why I went over that list. That's why there's so many species that are tied to this wetland and riparian areas that are endangered. Losing 90% of your home range you're gonna get these species and the whole system's in big trouble. And hence, that's why we have a lot of regulations, you know, to ensure that we are protecting our water resources and for drinking water and for wildlife and ecosystems. Of course, that goes hand in hand. That is a big balance there. So, you know, when we do construction of wetlands, thankfully, this was kind of the first project I ever did. Back when I started the company, I was a very confident 27-year-old who designed this, you know, and, you know, I probably would do it a lot differently now, but I had the opportunity and still manage this project where it was just a dirt field, and we constructed 40 acres of wetland and riparian system down in Orange County. And this water is actually just urban runoff that we're utilizing into a 6 acres of true wetland habitat. And it filters down and goes back into the groundwater. So understanding these water resources restoration and you know, manipulating them so that we can use them for agriculture, drinking water, recreation, and even restoration. It's all in this big cycle and balance. So so that's the end of the wetlands component. I wanted to just make sure that we talked about that, and then we'll talk about kind of our in-water work and diversions for our projects. These projects are all transportation related, either through Caltrans or counties, and bridge replacements or widening. So as we go through this, we'll show a few different diversions and how they actually regulate water quality. So this is just a slide showing like the actual importance of getting these permits. So if you have a creek or a river where there's a bridge, you're going to have typically you're going to have wildlife, either with fish, bats, birds, you know, turtles. Everything that I listed has a higher chance of being there. So depending on what is there and in the permitting process when you apply, you're going to have to get you know, all these different permits, especially if you're impacting the water. So the different types that I'm going to go over is the K-rail creek diversion, and a piped creek diversion, and then some in-water work, and some coffer dams and clear water diversions. So this is Dry Creek in the Browns Valley up north, and this is Highway 20. This is the Highway 20 bridge, and this bridge is going to be replaced. In order for them to do that, they needed to have a diversion in this creek right here to you know, have access. And however, there are steelhead and salmon that are known to be in this creek, so they have to allow fish passage throughout the life of this construction project. So here's some different slides of putting the K-rail in. So this one, what they did is to be able to work for longer periods, they putting this permanent structure, semi-permanent, more of a hard structure, since K-rail is very strong. We were able to put this in to Dry Creek and kind of narrow the temporarily narrow the passage to still allow for fish, and then we put native rock kind of behind the K-rail right here, and filled it. So, and of course, as we were doing that, we were measuring the turbidity in and out of the kind of upstream and downstream of the system, and also ensuring that there was nothing, no debris or anything coming out the site. And actually, what we were doing as well, as we were kind of putting this K-rail in, our biological team was seining out the wildlife that would be trapped through this K-rail barrier. So on that left slide where you see it's not an excavator, but it's an excavator, but it has a hook on it. Putting these down, you can see that there's this kind of little path of water that wildlife can get blocked in. So we seine those out, and we did remove some small fish and crayfish and bullfrogs, which aren't really native, but there was, you know, showing that there's wildlife there. So this is kind of like a getting out of the way. Sampling. Wanted to show that. I don't think we have to watch the whole thing. Kind of know what's happening. So this is kind of the finished product here. You still have this passage here, so fish and wildlife can move through the construction project, and there's still access here to kind of build the new bridge that's going to be coming out in the kind of the foreground of this photo. So, and then you can see from so if we're looking at the bridge, that is upstream, and the viewpoint is downstream. And then the photo on the right is you're under the bridge and you're looking downstream. So water remains pretty clean, no erosion going through, and this also enables for you know, higher flows. It's not going to create any more erosion because of the K-rails are kind of a solid structure. So going to Gulp, just south of Sacramento in San Joaquin County. This is Lagoon Creek. So I know there's a more well-known creek, Laguna Creek, which is just north of this area. This is called Lagoon Creek, and this actually is part of the Encumness River, kind of an upper stream part of it. And this area has, as you can see right here, there's swallows under the bridge, there's bats, and there's actually giant garter snake, which I didn't list on the species, but that is also an endangered species that occurs here. So ensuring that we're still allowing for movement of the water and wildlife to still utilize the area. This area actually didn't have a lot of flow. The flow was very, very low, if not any. However, it's still connected to irrigation. And so even though this system isn't necessarily completely natural, I would say Deep Creek has a little bit more, the last example, has a little bit more kind of natural kind of flow. You know, the irrigation districts and farmers and stuff, they really can affect how the water can flow almost unseasonably. So this one they've used you know, that black plastic pipe together, about I think 12 or 14 inches, and they put that in the creek, dewatered the area around it, removed any wildlife, of course, things like that, and then it was kind of buried there on the right. And then you can see, so I'll show you some videos here. Videos here. Another laid it in there. The project is actually, this is under the 99, Highway 99. That was probably the northbound bridge there. So, and then I actually can't see this lower. Move this display. Okay, and then you can see this is the pipe inlet up here, down here on the right corner. So this is the upstream component. So you can see the water is actually not really flowing. It's barely a trickle, but there are times when the irrigation from the upstream agricultural areas do play a larger role. Okay, so here's the after photo. You really can't even see it under the bridge because they have to actually widen this bridge. So there's a way to still get this water through. And then the outlet goes down, and actually, even though this is very dense, I mean, just on the other side of this turbidity curtain, you can see river otters and a lot of wildlife, western pond turtles, and things like that. So we're able to still protect the resources just right outside the project and still get that water through. And we do, this project does have daily testing to ensure that through this rapid kind of during up in the Sacramento area where there's a lot of rivers, a lot of construction is kind of this rapid seasonal construction that has to be done before certain dates based on permits. It could be because of the flow of water, or in this case, the giant garter snake, which starts to go underground in October, and so you really can't work past that date without the potential of impacting them in construction. So, and then you have the inlet over here, which has making sure that there's no additional sediment coming in from the project. So this third one, this in-water work here, is at the American River. The bridge is Highway 60. It's actually still connected with the Caltrans project 99. So this is interesting that there's one permit for two different locations and two different watersheds. So I've never really seen that before. It's pretty interesting. So anyway, this is Highway 160, just north of Sacramento, right? Kind of, it's in Sacramento, but the north end. American River, and it's a scouring project, so to protect the further scouring of the bridges here. So this work is all in water work. So putting up the turbidity curtains, they're creating these coffer dams, dewatering, and then they're going to be pouring rock kind of around the pier walls here to ensure that to protect against further scouring. So they had to build a trestle because you had to get to each pier wall to get this excavator out there, and then there was also barges and everything. And so this river, you know, a lot of creeks and everything, when you're doing water testing, you can just kind of walk up or get like a long you know, kind of a dip cup and just grab that water sample. Since this is a little bit bigger of a system, you know, you got to have a boat or different methods. So even if your boat breaks down or you don't have access, especially this year with COVID, it's even a bigger challenge. And sometimes we utilize the watercraft that the general contractor already has on site. So due to COVID, we weren't allowed to do that without a little bit more testing and things, which could slow down the process since we have to be testing the water here on a daily basis. So we came up with different methods, which I'll talk about in a minute. So here's the after of the trestle bridge here that they put in, and then you have these, you know, you have the turbidity curtains to ensure that the project is minimizing that turbidity to the main river there. So, you know, as you're doing in-water work, of course, sampling is a big part of that. You're ever diverting or you know, just impacts to the water within water work, making a trestle bridge or whatever. We have to ensure that, you know, the turbidity isn't breaking any thresholds, and the pH, if there's any concrete work or anything else going into the water, you know, isn't in effect. One other thing that mentioning dissolved oxygen, what's really important, especially with these rivers that have these fish, is when you have turbidity and you can block light, which then could affect the photosynthesis process, which could actually affect dissolved oxygen. And in worst case scenarios, especially with heat waves that we've had this summer, you could actually experience fish kills, which obviously wouldn't be looking good for any project or whether it's a project or not. Nobody wants to see floating salmon or trout. So, so we had different methods here at this is Dry Creek and the American River. Different, just kind of showing different ways to do this. So this is a baler method, which is essentially just a pole and a cup, and we kind of just attach them together in a way that the water sample wouldn't be compromised from that actual attachment, so no glue or chemicals or anything. And you know, you want to take different samples from surface and then some close to shore, some especially in the American River where they're working in the pier walls, you're going to be in the middle of that river. So like I said before, kind of touched on it, turbidity, pH, and DO are the main ones. Obviously that just depends on what kind of work is going on, but these, in terms of all the field testing, we can do that. And for these projects, these were the main metrics that we were collecting data on. So actually the fishing pole method, that was, you know, good thing that Cheyenne here, she's a really good caster. She's getting great samples from the middle. So when we didn't have access to a boat from the contractor and our boat wasn't being utilized in another area, we still, you know, wanted to make sure that we get our samples. So I guess she could have gone out in an inner tube or something and floated out there and done it, but this is a way that has actually been quite effective to get these samples. So getting the turbidity and pH. Obviously in a sample like this, you can't really get an accurate dissolved oxygen measurement. That has to be done in the water with a probe. So then of course, you know, when the boat is working or we do have access to it, you know, you get out in the middle and you make sure wherever the work is being done, you know, you can get closer for more accurate samples of what's happening. Also, you know, in these bigger systems, when you have, looking at this turbidity curtain, you can see that debris can really build up. And I think that that's something to look out for. Especially the American River has a lot of people using it. You know, there's a homeless community there. And so there can be a lot of trash, and this thing is flowing, you know, all summer long. So this could got to watch this in case, you know, this is moved or anything, that it doesn't flow off the project site. So it could be debris from the, obviously the debris from the project as well. So I kind of touched on a little bit of this. What is turbidity? You know, the measure of turbidity is really the clarity of water in the NTU unit, which I'm sure all of you guys know. And from a biological component, it's extremely important because if water becomes too turbid and the system isn't supposed to be, it can really affect the species that are photosynthesizing. It can actually cause health issues. So UV light kills coliform bacteria. So if that is being blocked by higher turbidity, you can actually get an increase in coliform bacteria, which can be an issue. If that's an issue, it becomes a health issue. It affects the people around it, off project, you know, and it can be a news story that nobody wants to be a part of. So, so along with it affecting, you know, the natural balance with the fish and amphibians and things that breathe underwater, it can also cause a health risk for people in drinking water. So the samples, we putting them in vials so that we can actually put them in the turbidity meter and ensure that we get an accurate reading. You know, making sure that those readings are, you know, once we get that information and determine if it's within the permit levels, so that we can they can continue working, or if there's an issue, we need to stop work and adjust or figure out what's going on. So then you can also use that turbidity sample to measure pH. So if it's going down, obviously that's acidic, and if it's going up, it's basic. So if there's any things that could cause a change in pH, concrete, or if there's for some reason a bunch of surfactants or soap or something in the water, that could potentially change it as well. So you know, pH would be an indicator of certain chemicals in the water, like I was just kind of talking about, and we don't want that to go too far, too low or too high. So pH is a measure of logarithmic units of hydrogen ions. So either it's hydronium or hydroxide, depending on the concentration of that will kind of tell you the number of pH, or the actual pH number. So 10 to the power of 7 would be neutral, of course, and I know all you guys kind of know that. So dissolved oxygen, I kind of mentioned that earlier as well. It's an important parameter because of how it influences aquatic wildlife. So at this time of year, if there are small ponds or shallow water and it gets really, really hot, there are natural fish kills that happen. So with that already naturally happen, it can be, we could tip the scale if it's almost there, if for some reason turbidity is high, or we're impacting these water resources in a way that could kind of exacerbate the situation. Another area, you know, obviously for water quality, you want to consider the surrounding areas, especially in the Sacramento Valley. There's a lot of agriculture, which means you're going to have, you know, different fluxes of water, water flows. There could be obviously chemicals in it, pesticides and whatnot. But these chemicals could also come from recreation, like oil slicks from you know, 2-cycle engines and things like that, and kind of the larger river systems. Roads, of course, if there's car accidents and there's oil spills and things like that, or a truck spills some chemicals, that all could be washed into the area. And then, of course, this year, for I would say pretty much everybody in California, we've experienced a lot of smoke and fires which, you know, we had internal discussions on how does that ash affect the water and the water chemistry. My guess is since ash is used to make soap in an old way, it makes the pH kind of increase to a more basic level. And then, you know, we had a team meeting with our fisheries biologist to see how would that affect, you know, salmon or anything like, will we see any fish kills? So anyway, you know, there's outer influences that are outside of our control that we just consider, because say all these things were happening, still want to determine if we do observe something occurring with water chemistry in the project site, that, you know, could it be from other resources and not just necessarily from the project. So this is just a couple photos of agricultural runoff that can be impacting water. You can see there's not really, you know, I mean, there's some root systems and things like that. I think that's California rose on the left, so they have pretty fibrous roots. But you can see it's pretty much bare ground, probably because the flow of the water fluctuates a lot, and that could add to the turbidity. You know, who knows if there's, you know, something in there like a oil spill that's a, you know, few inches down or something that then gets released. So that obviously can impact your site. I'm sure a lot of you who work in the field, human activity can affect a lot of sites, from people just stealing stuff or breaking things for no reason or dumping things. So that obviously can impact water quality and the progress of the project. And actually, you know, as kind of a secondary thing, it could increase the you having to do more work, which could increase the kind of stress the project as well, because the human, you know, activity like homeless and everything. And like I said, California wildfires, you know, the ash, the poor air quality, of course, that's going to impact water quality. And we did notice that there was a shift, a slight shift. It was still within the parameters, but we were noticing shifts in our metrics there. And, you know, we're assuming it was due to the ash. So we'd have to kind of investigate a little bit further to notice, but from our observations, we did at least see a change. So this is kind of the end of our presentation. I just wanted to make sure that we covered, you know, wetlands and the in-water work that we did this summer, and then how that affects the water and our project. So it's always important to, I think, have fun, but in a safe way, and make sure that you're safe and doing everything you can to protect the water resources out there. So thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Barry. Hey, we got some questions for you. So I'd love to also, if anybody else has questions. I personally have some questions. So for 401 projects, when in-water monitoring is required, how do you establish baseline? Is that something that's done before the project starts over a course of time, or is that something that's done each and every day? So is it one baseline number, or is it a new baseline number every day?
There is a new baseline number every day, because there can be a kind of a flex, and that probably is helpful to account for, you know, like I was explaining, agricultural influences, or say there is a stormwater flow or something like that that could affect it. So
okay.
There's also an initial pre-construction baseline that you take as well.
So when we're looking at a 401 water quality certification, and there's the requirements there, or limitations, that if it's, you know, that gives different turbidity ranges, we could literally jump from one range to another day to day.
Yeah, and you know, actually we had a challenge with the first project that I brought up, Dry Creek. Dry Creek. Sorry, I'm thinking Deep Creek and Dry Creek. There's all these creeks. So Dry Creek, where we were actually getting higher and higher turbidity, and it was coming up, it was increasing through the day due to wind and things. There was some from the work, but the water ended up, it wasn't flowing. So Caltrans went and talked to the water board and had a discussion saying that since the water isn't flowing and it's not flowing off the project, that you didn't have to continue to take those samples at that site, as long as it wasn't flowing, you know, and it wasn't
Okay.
going.
And kind of a follow-up question on that is, you mentioned homeless and homeless camps. We actually had a project recently where, you know, the 401 requires, I think, 300 feet downstream, take a sample, but there was a homeless camp approximately 100 feet downstream.
Right.
And they were visibly causing elevated turbidity because they were constantly crossing the stream, both people and animals and other activities going on. What do you do in that type of situation, whether it's upstream of you or downstream of you? In this case, it was between our project and the official sample point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't have that problem for any of these projects, but I've definitely observed on other projects people bathing with a bunch of soap in the water, and obviously that could change it. And then on the Mojave River in Southern California, they would drive four-wheelers kind of through. There was basically towns in the river system there. What we did to try and minimize it as much as we could is we put kind of several layers of turbidity curtains through that project, and that did help a lot. So when it was in the area of, and obviously this was, you know, consulted with the water board and everything, and that was also a Caltrans project, but I think we put an extra turbidity curtain and focused where the work was to take the samples. Because of that influence, it was really throwing the numbers off, like what you're kind of talking about.
Okay. Speaking of monitoring, there's a question here about what parameters should be monitored. Actually, a couple questions. So Mel says, I've seen water quality monitoring required for the following 6 items. Is there a field meter that can measure all 5? pH, turbidity, dissolved oxygen, TDS, and specific conductance and temperature. And then I would also add, I had a question. Earlier we saw permits requiring settable solids. Are those still being required?
I don't know the answer to that second one, if that's a question for me. They do have, I think on the higher end of those instruments, you can get all of those instruments in one. Dissolved oxygen is a little tricky, like I said, because it's so variable. So dissolved oxygen varies in the depth of the water. It's a temperature. It has a relation with temperature and the time of day and all of that. So I actually wouldn't recommend. I like, at least in my opinion, I like to keep the dissolved oxygen meter separate, even though it's an extra cost, just because there's a lot of variability and it can be tricky to get good numbers, and you might have to take multiple samples. While all those other measurements, I think, is all in one is pretty simple. Yeah.
Okay. What is considered in-water work? In other words, do you actually physically have to be in there, or if you have systems in the water like K-rail present, is that in-water work?
When you're putting the K-rail in, that is in-water work. So anything actually going in the water, building a trestle bridge, something that's going to directly impact the water quality. Obviously, anybody stepping in the water, all of that would be considered in-water work. Even vegetation removal, if you were, say, trimming wetland habitat and things like that out of there to get a clearing. So that would be considered in-water work as well.
But once you have a stabilized diversion system in place,
Mm-hmm.
assuming you're not physically in the water, then that's not in water?
Right. Correct. Yeah. So that was, and so that structure is then for what I presented on the diversion system for fish passage, essentially. So.
All right. I have Cliff Harvey actually online. Cliff actually is with the water board, and last I heard, Cliff is assigned to the water quality certification. Cliff, can you unmute? So you're on the phone, but let's see if I can even help you unmute. He actually gave a workshop on water quality certifications a year or two ago. Let's see if I can unmute him. Cliff, can we hear you? Try that, Cliff. I'm not sure if we can. He said he actually had audio through his phone.
Oh yeah.
But he did type in a comment here.
1, 2, 3. Can you hear me now?
Ah, there you are, Cliff. Well, thank
Okay.
you, Cliff.
Yeah. Well, I just sent a brief chat message to John if the audio didn't come through. Yeah, this can be a complicated subject because you're always looking at what the local problems are. But in general, the parameters required by the water boards for in-water monitoring are derived from the prohibitions and the stressors and the TMDLs identified in the basin plans. And that's usually at least things like dissolved oxygen, potential of hydrogen, temperature, turbidity, maybe settlable solids. But if there are local concerns that are specific to a given stressor, then if you are doing an activity that may affect the stressor, you may be required to monitor for something. Maybe there's problems with some legacy contamination in the area that you're working, and you may be required to monitor for something like PCBs or something that might accidentally come bubbling up out of the soil while you're working in the stream. Anything can happen, but fortunately those cases tend to be rather unusual. If you're working around endangered species, the Department of Fish and Wildlife may have species concerns that they want you to monitor for. Just like they monitor for bird nests, you might be monitoring for a rare crustacean or something. So the range really will depend on where you are working, and you will find the best place to start is by looking at the prohibitions in the basin plan that are in effect for your water body, and determine if your activity might affect any of the contaminants of concern or stressors or TMDLs that are present in the water there.
All right, thank you, Cliff. All right, anybody else have any other questions for Barry? Or Cliff, anything else you want to add? All right, let's see if I have any text questions in here that I missed. Well, Barry, I really appreciate you talking to us today on Stormwater Awareness Week about this important subject. I know, you know, just as you come from a biological side and have gotten into stormwater, many of us stormwater professionals are having to get more into in-water monitoring. And so we're having to cross over the other way too. And this is an area I know that many of my colleagues have had to get up to speed on, and I myself am still learning a lot in this area. So really appreciate your time today and insights into this. And so Barry, if people want to get a hold of you, how's the best way they can reach you?
I think through email would be pretty easy, or my phone number. I could send that to you, John.
Yeah, or just put it into the chat there to everyone. Just go ahead and type that into everybody.
Where is the chat
here? Down at the bottom, there's a chat bubble.
Oh, you know what? Maybe it's because I have my full screen up.
Or you know what? I'll do it for you. Just give it to me and I'll type it in.
I got it. So here,
All right.
here
Any other questions, anybody, while he's typing in his contact information? It's Endemic Environmental Services, so I'm sure they would be willing to talk to you about in-water work, in-water monitoring, and I know Barry's been very helpful for us here at WGR. So, all right. Get that.
All right. So yeah, I just sent that. Yeah, no, thanks a lot, John, for
There it
everything.
is.
Really appreciate the opportunity to share what our experiences and our knowledge to the greater body of knowledge that you guys already have.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today's Stormwater Awareness Week workshop. We have lots of other workshops that are coming up. Even today, there's the next one's at 11 o'clock from Water Tectonics on navigating TMDL compliance. And then later today, we have IGP one. So whether your background is construction, municipal, or industrial, there's many workshops still coming up for that. And don't miss our keynotes. You can still catch yesterday's keynote. It's recorded, it's online, where we interviewed Amy Cronson, who's now the lead, took the place of Laura Wardrop for the industrial and construction permits. So she's the lead for that. And tomorrow you're going to hear from Brandon Rosenboom, who's the lead for the construction general permit at the Water Board. And then on Friday, it'll be with Pushpa and Ella, who are the lead for the industrial general permit. So you won't want to miss those. They're talking about the current permits plus things that are coming up, some new developments. So definitely want to get those interviews and find out what they're saying. So you can watch those at any time once they're online. So tomorrow's will be online first thing in the morning. All right. Well, I don't think I see any other questions. So Barry, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for attending.
All right, thanks, John.